The passing away of Russia's UN envoy Vitaly Churkin on Monday has brought an outpouring of emotion around the world as people share their condolences. However, to some in both mainstream and social media, he's not a hero, but more another excuse to bash Russia. Well, here's Anisa Nawi.
Have people gone insane? And when I say people, I mean those that call themselves journalists. A guy dies, and before the body is cold, boom, the vultures are out planting suspicion and sensation. Why? Because the dead guy is a high-ranking official? Because he's a diplomat, a father, a human being? No, because he's Russian. It has become so uncool to not hate Russia that even when someone dies, they can't just die. Respected journalists are sowing seeds of suggestions ever so slightly and then saying, what? I didn't mean to suggest anything. What exactly were you trying to suggest, if not that Churkin knew too much, was close to Trump, and that he might have maybe kinda had something to do with his death just hours after it happened? This is a journalist who's written and contributed to almost all media big shots, not some troll on Twitter. It's like Putin is recreating that baptism scene from The Godfather. Really? That was tweeted by someone who contributes to The Atlantic, Time, and Forbes magazine. What's worse is that those who choose to take the high road are attacked for sending condolences when a man they worked with dies of a heart attack. See what I did there? I didn't say a diplomat or Russian official. I said man, because when it comes down to it, that's what he was. Which is why U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, sent condolences when another human that she worked with, Vitaly Churkin, died. That's what people do. But she was berated on Twitter for this, for saying she feels something when someone she knows dies. The hysteria has gone so far that being human doesn't matter. You're either with us or against us. Nothing else counts.
It is RT International. We have some breaking news for you this hour. Russia's Supreme Court has cancelled the sentence of political activist Ildar Dadin, who was earlier charged with repeated violation of rules of public protest. The case was viewed by Russian opposition figures and some human rights groups as politically motivated. With the new court decision, his case has now been closed. We'll give you more details in a few moments. For now, we're back in just a few moments.
What politicians do is something we don't do. They put themselves on the line, and they get accepted or rejected. So when you want to be president, where did you want to be? Why would someone want to be president? What's it like to be president? What's it like when the phone rings at 3 in the morning? Can't be a good call. I'm interested always in the whys and the hows. And Q Larry. Question more.
People with stories to tell. Those who deserve to be heard. Studied inside out, but still with unrevealed secrets. Leaders, politicians, thinkers, and witnesses. They're here to speak. Are you there to hear?
Thanks for joining us on the program. British Prime Minister Theresa May has greeted French presidential hopeful Emmanuel Macron in London. The meeting came on an unusual trip to rally support among French expats in the English capital.
The key to my strategy is to defend the special relationship between Great Britain and Europe, and particularly between Great Britain and France. I think it would be a huge mistake for both Great Britain and Europe if the UK were to distance itself from Europe and abandon common projects because of Brexit.
Theresa May's decision to meet Macron is seen as part of a policy of refusing to engage with Macron's anti-establishment rival Marine Le Pen. However, the Prime Minister's spokesperson denied the meeting shows Theresa May's bias towards the centrist candidate. And with just 2 months left until the voting day, hysteria has already started to spread in the media yet again over alleged Russian hacking of the French elections. And the claims originated from Emmanuel Macron's camp. And our correspondent tried to catch up with him during his London visit to find out where he's getting the evidence of alleged Russian hacking.
Do you have any evidence that Russian hackers are hacking your emails?
No, I don't. I mean, we have evidence of attacks coming from Ukraine and Russia. We have evidence of the fact that some very well-known Russian website conveyed rumors and common opinion. So we just make a wake-up call, and I noticed that our president and the national security advisors reacted very promptly about this.
And will you release it? Will you release it? Will you release the evidence?
Now, from his answer, it was unclear exactly what he meant by Russian websites showing remorse. And even when I asked him when he would produce that evidence or whether he would produce that evidence, he had walked off and wasn't willing to answer the question. Now, the Kremlin have rejected these allegations, saying that they fall under a pattern of anti-Russian hysteria. And these aren't the only elections the Russians are alleged to have been interfering in. The American losing candidate Hillary Clinton repeatedly, her campaign accusing the Russians of interfering to help Donald Trump win. But yet, when evidence is asked to be brought forth, American officials were somewhat not so forthcoming.
It doesn't mean that there isn't additional evidence out there. I'm sure that there is. But there is a priority that's placed on protecting sources and methods.
We would be protecting sources and methods.
When you're talking about cybersecurity, a lot of it is classified, and we're not going to provide it.
German intelligence also confirmed that there was no smoking gun to allegations that, again, Russian hackers had somehow been trying to interfere in German politics. So we see somewhat of a pattern. Many allegations, many accusations being thrown towards Russia or Russian hackers, but very little in the way of evidence coming forward.
Meanwhile, Max Kaiser looks at the economic consequences for the UK of quitting the EU. That's in the latest episode of Boom Bust. You can watch the full version throughout the day here on this network.
The real income of the average Brit will suffer dramatically under Brexit. It's the stupidest thing anyone could have voted. It's an own goal. It's moronic. They're going to rue the day they voted Brexit. The GDP of the UK versus the EU is maybe 4%, whereas the GDP percentage of trade that the UK does with the EU is like 17, 18, 19%. It's 5 times greater. The EU could basically play games with the UK all day long, and they're going to lose at most 3 or 4% of GDP across the board, and they're willing to sacrifice that to just get rid of this little pit bull, you know, biting their ankles.
English bulldog.
Yeah, English bulldog, English pit bulldog, you know, biting at their ankles. It's not worth it. Just get rid of them. Dump the UK and be done with them.
It's RT International. As Ukrainians mark the 3rd anniversary of the Maidan uprising, ousted President Viktor Yanukovych has described its legacy and called for an end to the hostilities in the east of the country.
It is vital to immediately end the bloodshed. This can only be done by investigating the crimes committed during the Maidan uprising in Odessa and at other key trigger points leading up to the civil war. I am also convinced that without a fair investigation of these crimes under international monitoring, it will be impossible to achieve genuine reconciliation in my country, which is the only condition for its further development as a unified state. There are many witnesses who do not want to hand over evidence to the authorities because they know that all of the previous evidence made available over the past 3 years has been destroyed and that this process is still ongoing. So we have gathered a large body of evidence, and there are people who are willing to provide more, but they want to submit it to an international monitoring mission. It should be created on the basis of the signed agreement. I agreed to almost all of the demands made by the opposition for the sake of one thing: to prevent bloodshed and civil war. because Ukraine was split in two. The main reason for the tragic events in Ukraine, and this shocked me, was a huge desire to seize power at any cost. This was the main reason. The people behind the coup used all the methods known from the earlier color revolutions and the Arab Spring. But this was a separate Ukrainian project. At the beginning of 2014, the people of Donbass took a stand against the radical actions of the Maidan movement. It was a protest against an unconstitutional coup, but nobody wanted to listen to them. They were considered inferior. For me, this was illogical. If you seize power, you have to wield that power. Why would you want to undermine yourself, your own power and the government that has fallen into your hands at such a heavy price? But nobody felt this sense of responsibility, and they still don't. Poroshenko won the election on the basis of one promise: to stop the war. Did he do this? He did not. The war continues. And now there are no alternatives to the Minsk agreement.
Back to this hour's breaking news here on RT International. Russia's Supreme Court has cancelled the sentence of political activist Ildar Dadin, who was earlier charged with repeated violation of rules of public protest. Let's get more details now. I'll cross live to our correspondent, RT's Ilya Petrenko, standing by for us now. Ilya, can you give us more details about this case, please?
Rory, hello. Well, it must be a day of massive relief for Ildar Dadin, a Russian political activist who took part in opposition protests a few years ago. But he was first arrested for repeated violations of the rules of public rallies and marches back in March 2014. Although the changes to Russian legislation which eventually led to his prison sentence, were in fact put in place later in summer. So these are the arguments that his lawyers were pushing forward at the Supreme Court, Russia's higher court, the highest court possible, and eventually this led to a decision to cancel that sentence. Now, this case was viewed by Russian opposition and also many human rights groups as politically motivated. Well, now, with this latest decision by Russia's Supreme Court, his case has been cancelled.
All right, RT's Ilya Petrenko. Thank you. All right, next year on RT International, it's going underground. Unless you're joining us from the UK or Ireland, then the story of the young man jailed for robbery when he was just 14 years old and told he would never see freedom again. That's coming your way next.